Hi, my name is Jerry Croft, and I'm a professor in California. And I just wrote a book, and I don't know if you can read the title of it, but so I'll put some green arrows there to show you Messages from the Gods, a scientific exposition on the extraterrestrial origin of crop circles. Now, that is a controversial title, okay? And this is a very controversial talk. So get ready. Before we get into the juicy parts of this discussion, which is going to take you, this is not a conspiracy theory, this is a question that is asked about whether or not you can be absolutely sure all crop circles are human in, in their fundamental construction. And I take the position in this book that that may not be the case. So let's start with hoaxes. Two guys named Doug and Dave in the 90s, I believe, went out and made crop circles with boards and pipes and ropes. And they said, see, we fooled the world. Okay? And they had a good laugh and they went to the pub. Now, Doug and Dave, in the literature, if you look at it, they boasted that they made 200 crop circles. But when I investigated their crop circles, I couldn't find a list of their 200 crop circles. I saw many of their crop circles and they were pretty shabby as far as I was concerned, but I certainly didn't see 200. So I thought there was an element of bragging going on here. Now, crop circle makers have gotten more intelligent and better at their art. They call it their art, but remember, they're trespassing on a farmer's field, and they're committing a crime generally, not in the vast majority of cases. But here's a video that crop circle makers, human crop circle makers, made of how they could make a crop circle in the middle of the night. You can see it forming. I hope you can see this on video, but there are little people running around making this, and there's a timer at the lower left of the screen, and they are creating a crop circle and making circles and moving to the bottom of the screen and then moving down the tram lines, trying to be very careful about not leaving footprints so that everyone will think that that aliens maybe made them. There's a place called Circle Makers TV. They have their own gatherings. A lot of them use fake names, are anonymous, okay? And the title of this tells you the whole story. It's called Secrets of Deception. And that's what this is all about, deception. So I did a lot of research trying to estimate how many crop circles can we say are really made by human beings. This guy is named the Archbishop P.I. Staker, okay, and he's masked. There have been a couple of arrests, but not many. But there have been 4,000 published crop circles that I'm aware of. And my estimate was initially about 20% were human made, clearly human made. That doesn't mean the rest are aliens. It just means that it was obvious that humans were here, there were footprints, there were tire tracks, and so forth. But as time wore on, I realized that these guys that I was interviewing said, oh, I made that, and I made that, and my friends made this, and I couldn't pin them down on give me a specific list. I mean, they made everything, they say, and but there's no standard of proof to say, well, can you prove that you actually made this? A lot of comments on YouTube are, come on, man, you never made that. So there are indeed human crop circles, which I am absolutely, consummately not interested in, looking at, studying, trying to interpret. I think they're generally shabby and stupid and ridiculous. And you can see footprints leading to, leading from, and they're not impressive. And as soon as I found that a crop circle was made by humans, I disregarded it. Okay, I was not at all interested in it. So I chose about 40 crop circles in this book that are just absolutely mysterious. So there are some very amazingly complex crop circles, but in the vast majority of cases, farmers are not complicit in their construction. And this farmer did not like that crop circle, and he started to plow it up the very next day. It was amazing that we got any photographs of it at all. So that afternoon, that crop circle was gone. Okay? But how do you tell the difference between an absolutely human-made one and a one that you're not sure? It's kind of like UFOs. Can you explain it by natural phenomena, or is there a mystery? Well, there is definitely a mystery, which we are going to explore here. One way that I think Dutch researchers are credited with is that there are often dead flies on the stalks of the crop circle. They are frozen in place. They're dead, but somebody needs to do an autopsy, because they didn't get squished to death. They're in perfectly good shape, only they're dead. The seedlings sometimes have burn marks, radiation marks. Generally, a human-made crop circle has blown the stems of the plants, whereas other crop circles that are less well known as human are bent. So there are ways. Now here's a little video on another mysterious crop circle.
The night this formation came down, it was windy. This is a high altitude location. This takes a battering by the weather. So we were with two other researchers. We were the first little group of people to come in here. No footprints, no mud, no no broken plants. All the centers were perfect. No sign of human activity or entry into this field. It seemed almost impossible that could be the work of a few humans going out and smashing the plants down with pieces of wood. It just seemed far too sophisticated, far too perfect. Some of these designs, you couldn't draw them out on a piece of paper freehand or with a desk lamp, let alone 1,000 feet wide in a wheat field in the dark, in the rain. Sometimes it just seemed impossible.
So there's a famous biologist named Rupert Sheldrake who said, I think this is about crop circles, but I'm not sure. He said, the fact that it is possible to forge a 50-pound note does not prove that all 50-pound notes are forgeries. And that's where this book sort of begins, okay? There is some, not much, but some very serious academic work on crop circles. There's a tremendous amount of bias, by the way, in the scientific community. Tremendous amount of bias. So if you say crop circles, you're crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not going to talk to you. But take a look at this crop circle. It is extremely jagged and exact and precise. And you say, my God, what is that? What is that supposed to be? Well, a retired astrophysicist decided to see if he could decode it, and he was successful. He discovered that this is a pictogram of pi to 10 digits. Okay? Now, if you read my book or research this on Google, you'll see how to decode that. But he gives you instructions. He shows how it exactly comes out to pi 3.1, but 4 for about 10 digits. Now, just think, if this is done in the middle of the night by a team of hoaxers, and they're doing this, if they're 6 inches off, okay, their digits are not going to be correct. So this is really, really more exacting than you realize. So I'm going to be talking about, in this book, I talk about 40 crop circles that I think they do not easily fit into the human-made model. There are no dogs barking, no footprints, and they're tremendously exact. And guess what? They're difficult. They're not easy. They're not just pretty pictures. And I have a PhD in psychology, okay? I'm not an expert on nuclear physics or astrophysics or molecular biology. So I wrote this book about some 40 crop circles as a layman. And I consulted many scientists, maybe 20, 25 scientists. I consulted in working out stuff that is way over my head. Most crop circles are way over my head. But these 40 are going to make you say, oh, my God, is it possibly true? Is it possibly true that this is an extraterrestrial communication to the human race? And you're going to say, wow, 3 times in this lecture, because I can only do 3 crop circles here, because they all take a bit of time. Let's go for our first one. And I'm asking you at the outset to be patient, okay? At the end of this little segment, you're going to say, oh my God, But before we get there, we have to do some homework. And some of this takes a little patience. So this is a crop circle that has a series of circles. It has occurred in July of 2010, and 2 circles on top, and with rings around them. And it looks like these circles are somehow interacting with each other. Now this circle appeared right across the river from a nuclear power station. You can see it on the lower left, hopefully, the circle and the river. And across the river is the Oldbury Nuclear Power Station. So I read in the Crop Circle Connector, which is a publication online that is very reasonable and respectable and eclectic. Somebody talked, of course, the people who write many of these interpretations say this is satanic, or this is New Age, or this is sacred geometry. And I try to find the things that I can get my head around. And I thought, this has something to do with radioactivity, maybe. So there's a sense of animation in this crop circle. And I wondered, what is that? What am I looking at? What is that? If this is something about radioactivity, that looks like some kind of radioactive reaction. Maybe this crop circle is suggesting something about a blowout of the Oldbury reactor across the river. That was one thought, but I wanted to tie that down. Now, if you look at the crop circle itself, there are 6 rings around that central nucleus, and there's a diagram of the same crop circle. So one investigator, I think I mentioned him, said, I think that's uranium. And I said, but wait, I wrote to him and I said, uranium has 7 electron shells. This has 6. So most radioactive elements have 7 electron shells. Stay with me, don't go away. All right, so there are 3 elements that I discovered, radioactive elements that have 6 rings. Count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? Polonium, astatane, that's astatane. There's cesium, extremely deadly and dangerous. That's what happens when you have a Chernobyl-like disaster. And then polonium, 6 rings. Remember the Russian, there was a Russian guy named Litvinenko who was in London. He was a dissident, and they said that Putin or the KGB or the FSB wanted to get rid of him, and they had tea with him and dropped a tiny bit of polonium in his drink. And he succumbed to it. He's the only person ever to have died from polonium poisoning. 10 micrograms killed him. It took the British $100,000 to clean up that little bar where he had a cup of tea. Now, so we talked about those 2 circles, the big ones that have 6. What are the 2 electron shells on the top? I didn't find many radioactive elements that are 2-shelled, but there was one, beryllium. Can you see it? 1 and 2. So we have radioactive elements described in this crop circle. Maybe our interpretation is coming along, right? We have polonium, astatine, cesium, beryllium. Now, let's talk about the nuclear reactor across the river. Oldbury is 46 years old at the time. It's considered an aging dinosaur of nuclear power plants. Local people are saying, we need to get rid of this, we need to close it down, it's dangerous. And they say, no, it's doing fine, don't you worry about anything. So, in 2007, there is an incident at Oldbury. Now, we're not talking crop circle anymore. No one pays attention to crop circles. All right? First incident at Oldbury occurs in 2007, and they said, we better close one of the 2 reactors down. It's that serious. So they closed one of the 2 reactors, decommissioned it. All right, this crop circle appears in 2010, 3 years later. Following this? Now the following year, after the crop circle, that was the lost straw, because there was another incident in the 2nd reactor, and they said, oh my God, this could be Chernobyl, we have to shut this down now, and they shut it down. Okay, It took something like 5 years to completely clean up the site. So let's take a look just a little bit at how dangerous this is. There was a group of anti-nuclear activists in England who wanted to shut down Oldbury, and they said, if you had a Chernobyl-like disaster, a meltdown at Oldbury, that is how much of England would be covered with radiation, and the dark red areas are fundamentally uninhabitable. There's a large chunk of England that would become uninhabitable if there was a Chernobyl-like explosion, and there almost was. So I wanted to discover what they found when they cleaned up Oldbury, and there was a company, which is the name of it is in my book, and they published a report, and I want to know what debris did you find in the 5 years that you spent cleaning up that site? Well, they found polonium, they found beryllium, and they found astatine. And I thought, whoa, that is cool. That is mind-blowing. I was doing my wow before you on this one. Now, let's talk about Chernobyl for a second. Chernobyl was the largest nuclear disaster in human history. That black cloud is filled with radioactivity that is going up into the sky, across Belarus, into Sweden, into Denmark, into Poland, and it was a huge, huge, huge disaster. So let's talk a little bit about what that is. There was a city near Chernobyl that was called Pripyat, and it housed 50,000 people, and they all left and they never returned. This is 30 years later, totally empty of human activity completely. Okay, that's Chernobyl, 1986. This is the radioactive dust from the Chernobyl disaster reached across northern and western Europe and even as far as the eastern United States. It could take up to 100 years before Chernobyl is completely decommissioned. Okay? The Chernobyl explosion unleashed at least 400 times more radioactive fallout than the bomb the United States dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. Here's a guy who visited Chernobyl.
So now you can find all of these high-rise Soviet apartments.
Took a risk.
Completely empty and crumbling. And the forest is basically reclaiming this whole town. When the residents of Pripyat were told to evacuate, they were told that they would only be away for 2 weeks. So they left most of their belongings. Their lives are on display here.
So it took a little guts to make that movie. But apparently it's safe for a short period of time. So let's go to Fukushima. We're coming back to our crop circle. Stay with me. Fukushima, 2011. It cost $3.4 billion to build, but there was an earthquake which caused a tsunami which hit these 4 nuclear power plants, and a couple of them blew, and the cost of the cleanup is $200 billion compared to the cost of construction, which was $3 billion, and it's not going to be easy. Okay, it contaminated an area rather permanently of 30 kilometers. The estimated losses are about $500 billion. Cesium was detected. Cesium comes out when there's a big explosion. It was detected up to 200 kilometers from the site. 56% of all fish caught around that facility were contaminated. 30,000 people were permanently, just like in Pripyat, permanently displaced. Now, an American scientific group did a computer simulation of the spread of radioactivity in Fukushima. The red and orange parts into the Pacific Ocean, and it still isn't under control. And the estimate is that it'll take about 3 years before radioactivity hits the Bering Sea, and about 5 years before the radioactivity reaches the United States. But it is scheduled to really, really have an impact on the entire Pacific region. Okay? And the Japanese are doing everything they can to contain it. And they're not very successful as of this date, which is 2019. Now, let's go back, with all of that background and homework that we did, let's go back to Oldbury and the crop circle, okay? And say, what is going on here? This crop circle is saying something. And it is saying something, I think, about Oldbury. So let's think this through. Who made that crop circle? All right, now we're being objective here. It's possible that vandal crappies came and made a pretty circle with a bunch of circles in rings, and that's it. Nothing to do with Oldbury, nothing to do with the river. They just made a pretty picture that they drew on a spirograph, and that's it. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. And that's how we could look at it. And that's how a lot of cynics look at it. So you ignore a lot of coincidences, but that's how you could look at it. It's just a pretty picture. Go away. Fine. Maybe anti-nuclear activists who were concerned about Oldbury, maybe they drew that crop circle. That's a little more reasonable. And then you think, wait a minute, no, that isn't that more reason. First of all, if you're an anti-nuclear activist, you want to close that facility. That crop circle is not going to do it for you. Nobody's going to pay attention to a crop circle because everybody thinks crop circles are made by tricksters. So they're not going to analyze it. 5 people in the world will figure it out. That's not going to spread your message. Okay, if you wanted to stop that Oldbury plant and you wanted to make a crop circle, you could make it and say, in English, this reactor is going to blow, close it now. That would be a reasonable crop circle to make in English if you're an anti-nuclear activist. So then who made that crop circle? Okay, and that's where I come in with the idea that maybe an extraterrestrial source made it. It's in a language no one understands or everyone could understand. It is pointing to a power plant across the way. It is containing a message that says this place is dangerous, not just to the English. It's dangerous to the human race. So let's sort of summarize why Oldbury is important, and I hope you got here. All right, I hope you had the patience to stay with this. So, cesium is portrayed in this crop circle. Cesium was found in this Oldbury plant before the debris was cleaned up, because cesium is part of the nuclear process. Aspartame was portrayed in this crop circle. Aspartame was found across the river in the nuclear power plant. Beryllium was portrayed in this crop circle at the 2 top circles. And beryllium was found at the nuclear power plant. Polonium was portrayed here, and polonium was found at the site when they were cleaning it up. Okay? There was a potential fissile reaction that was portrayed in this crop circle. Okay? An interaction of elements, movement, blow up, meltdown, accident, catastrophe. And there was a potential fissile reaction the next year, which was so serious they closed the plant down. So this crop circle, if you translated it into English, it would say this: pay attention to the aging defective fission reactor across the river. The elements cesium, aspartame, polonium, and beryllium can pose serious danger to this area of your planet and to your species for generations. Polonium doesn't exist on planet Earth. It's only a product of nuclear reactors, and it's extremely lethal to humanity. So, could it actually be true? I mean, here's the time to say, oh my God, what if this was not made by anti-nuclear activists. The crop circle trespassers are not smart enough to make that. That is a very smart warning about a potential Chernobyl. And your reaction is, my God, what if it's true? Seriously, what if this really is an extraterrestrial communication that we're ignoring, have ignored it right there in front of our eyes, and we just say, wow. It's about time to say, wow, maybe this deserves serious attention. Okay? Because there's enough here to say, all right, so this book has 40 wows in it, okay? But each one of them takes you on a journey into science that seems over your head, but it's written for a layman. I'm a layman, and let's now go to the second crop circle. Now we're going to end up with the same reaction that you just had, and it's going to take us to a new place, and I ask you for your patience, because I'm taking you on a journey now into molecular biology. So here's a crop circle that appears in 2012. It's in a red poppy field. If you look closely at sort of in the center, you see a couple people standing around. Those are spectators who snuck in, and the farmer didn't like that. But you can get the sense that this crop circle is as large as a football field. Now that intricate, you can see little tiny dots. And what are those? And how did they make them? And how did they make them in the middle of the night? And what is it? Or who cares? Which is really a serious-minded person today who has this bias, who's been infected by this bias, says, it's just a pretty picture. I'm not interested in it. Now, the farmer did not like people hanging around and entering his fields, and he made specific statements. Please do not enter this field under any circumstance. He didn't like it. He didn't like that they destroyed his crops. Now, a guy who is an organic chemist who graduated from Caltech as a PhD said, that's vitamin A. It's called retinol. I detect vitamin A in this crop circle. He superimposed the molecular structure of vitamin A on the crop circle, and lo and behold, we say, oh my God, that's vitamin A. So why would aliens make a crop circle for vitamin A? What are they selling? Supplements? Or maybe that's commercial. Maybe some commercial enterprise that sells vitamin A supplements made it. Why would you do that? Nobody pays attention to crop circles. Nobody's going to decipher that. 5 people in the world are going to figure that out. So I thought, we better take a look at what vitamin A does. This is where the homework comes in. My approach to this is, well, this passed the smell test. There are no footprints around here, no sign of human involvement. It's in a red poppy field. Red has something to do with vitamin A. Time to look up. Maybe I don't know enough about vitamin A. I just thought it was for vision. So I consult scientists. Here is a scientist for you.
Hey guys.
Sure.
In this video, I want to talk about vitamin A, okay? There's some real interesting things about the fat-soluble vitamin. What does that mean? You have water-soluble vitamins and you have fat-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins have the ability to travel through fat, to be stored in fat longer. It has the ability to go through cell walls because the layer around cells are fat lipid layers or fat layers. These vitamin A, fat-soluble vitamins, can go right through the cell where water-soluble vitamins cannot. So they can affect the deep parts of the cell, the DNA, the alteration of the DNA, and that's why vitamin A deficiencies can really affect what your skin turns into, okay, at the genetic level. White little dots, the skin, on the hair follicles you can have. You can't see at night. When you're driving at night, it's hard to see. That's a vitamin A deficiency, okay? Also, lubrication of the eye and the mouth. That's a vitamin A deficiency.
All right, so in doing my homework and saying to myself, okay, this is not about vitamin supplements. Vitamin A is beyond what I know, so I better do some research. What does vitamin A do? Well, vitamin A is related to visual pigment perception. Remember, the crop circle is in a red poppy field, and that is very cool. Now, I wanted to find out, well, just how many red poppy fields are there around there? So I looked in the distance, in some of these distant photographs, and I didn't see any red poppy fields. And if you take a look at this picture, I mean, you can see far in the distance, there are no other red poppy fields. That's the only one. And I looked it up. How long are red poppies blossoming? The answer is 4 weeks. So if you're a crop circle maker, human, smart, and you're going to make a vitamin A crop circle, and you want to put it surreptitiously into a farmer's field just when it's blossoming, you got a 4-week window to plan it, to get your team, to get all your equipment, to invade his field just at the right time, to do your vitamin A crop circle. That doesn't seem to make sense to me. It goes against, it doesn't seem that there are people who do that. Okay, so there's more about vitamin A that I learned. First of all, vitamin A deficiency affects mortality and fertility. Women who experienced recurrent miscarriages suffered vitamin A deficiency. Female rats with vitamin A deficiency had difficulty getting pregnant and had embryos with birth defects. Okay. Another study showed that vitamin A deficiency impacts male sperm counts, declining. Okay, you're looking at it this way, so it's going to be declining that way. Vitamin A deficiency is related to higher incidence of death from measles and diarrhea in children. Well, we're learning a lot about retinol and vitamin A deficiency, aren't we? So right now, this interpretation of the crop circle, what we're working on is we have a molecular diagram of retinol, vitamin A, down to the electron, those little dots, okay, electrons. And that, we've had a disagreement. I think that that represents the retina. I had two chemists discussing this with me, and they disagreed with one. One said it's a dimer. The other said it's not a dimer. That was all over my head, but that they both seem to accept the fact that vitamin A is portrayed in this crop circle. So I wondered about vitamin A deficiency. That is a map of vitamin A deficiency on this planet. Anything that's orange or red is either serious or clinical vitamin A deficiency. And that affects a large chunk of the human race. 250 to 5,000 to 500,000 children become blind every year, half of them dying within 12 months of losing their sight because vitamin A deficiency. There's more. 1/7 of the human race suffers from a deficiency in this micronutrient that impacts vision, intelligence, immunity, fertility, mortality. That's 14% of the human race. That's why it's in a red poppy field. It's there to say, here's vitamin A. It has to do with pigment perception. It has to do with vision and blindness. Study it, learn about it, because it impacts your species. So I was thinking this, okay, let's think this through again. Let's be objective, we can. Who could have made this crop circle? Okay, we think Vandal Crappies did it. I'm sure there will be somebody who says, yeah, I did that too. And we had a beer afterwards. But you got that crop circle down to the electron. Why did you do that? Nobody pays attention to crop circles. Nobody tries to decode them. The scientific community is not at all interested in your little game. And you put it into a poppy field when it was blossoming, and you only had 4 weeks to do it. It's a masterpiece of human creativity and ingenuity, and how you did that, and how you made the little electrons in the dark. I mean, it is impossible, and that's the whole point. It is impossible. So, maybe vitamin A activists did it. People who are concerned about vitamin A deficiency. I'm sure there are some, I don't know any, but there must be some people on Earth who say vitamin A deficiency. There must be some charitable organization that says vitamin A deficiency needs to be eradicated, and it does. But are you going to make a crop circle? Why would your group make a crop circle that nobody's going to pay attention to? Nobody's going to decode. And you're going to do it in a red poppy field. That's cool, very nice to do that. But don't you want to spread your message? If you made a crop circle and you wanted to spread your message, say it in English. Help eradicate vitamin A deficiency, act now. That would be a good crop circle. But you didn't do that. And it isn't in English. And you didn't make that crop circle, did you? So my last alternative is that an extraterrestrial presence or entity, he, she, it, whatever, made a crop circle that has a message for the human race. And if you translate that message from the gods, it says in English, your knowledge of vitamin A is sufficient, but your ability to deliver it is not. 14% of Homo sapiens are afflicted by this impoverishment and experience blindness, premature death, and reproductive failure because of your inability to eradicate this deficiency in your species. That's a message that is delivered to us which we are ignoring. And you say, could this be true? I mean, wow. I think it's possible. It is definitely possible. Okay, that's your second wow. And I hope you followed me to this point. And we had to go and study microbiology and chemistry to do it, didn't we? Okay, so that's why I can only do 3 in this talk. And that's why it's doing 40 in my book is a lot. But those were the only ones that I could really understand. There are many crop circles that are way over my head. Are you ready for the third one? It's a new adventure, and this takes your patience. Again, one more wow is coming your way if you stick with me. Here are 2 crop circles that appeared in 2 different places, about 50 miles apart, on the same day. That intrigued me. Why would 2 crop circles appear on July 13th, 2011? And I thought, oh, they're human guys making the crop circles, and they must have made one, and then they drove for an hour and made another, or maybe there were 2 teams that made it, and I said, I'm not interested in this. It did catch me. The only thing that attracted me initially was that it was July 13th. Why would 2 be done on the same night? And then when I looked at closer photographs, I said, my God, look at the precision. This is incredibly precise. It was almost like it was machined. It was so perfect. And I said, maybe you shouldn't just ignore this that easily. So I started to try to figure a little something out. And again, you can read the crop circle connector to learn a little about this. If you start at the top, at the bottom of the central circle A, and go round and round and round, you go clockwise, and then you leave the circle. But if you stop at the top of that little central part at B, you go round and round and round, and you go into the other crop circle, into the other side of it, you go counterclockwise, okay? You meet in the center point at C. Now at D and E do the same thing. You start at the bottom and you go around and round and round and you go out. You start at E and you go round and round and round and you end up at the center point and go on to the next circle. All right, so what? Well, in starting to think, what are the theories to explain this? Human beings have an attraction to labyrinths. Okay, they make gardens like this. They walk around in these circles and they experience. These are kind of meditative experiences that are historic in human spiritual history. So it's possible that human beings made this as a kind of meditative, sacred, spiritual event. All right, that's one possibility. I didn't stay there. I thought about wormholes that looked a little bit like what we were looking at. If you turn this around, I suppose I could have rotated that figure. And maybe these crop circles have something to do with space-time and wormholes. Okay, I was going to pursue that, but I was making a list of possible explanations. And another one was matter and antimatter. It turns out that all matter has an antimatter component, and they turn in opposite directions, clockwise, counterclockwise. There's hydrogen, and then there's the mirror image, anti-hydrogen. And I thought, maybe this has something to do with matter and antimatter. So that seemed to be a reasonable thought. Then I read a journal on magnetism, an academic journal, and they showed this GIF. And I said, oh my God, there's an animation process in this crop circle. This has something to do with magnetism. So I started to look out to outer space because I started to see pictures of stars that looked like my crop circle, or one of them at least, and they were called magnetars. And I said, I just felt this is a place to go, because when you look at them, they look like the crop circle. It turns out that a magnetar comes from a neutron star, which is a pulsar, and I don't know anything about any of this. So, time to do some homework. What is a neutron star and what is a magnetar? Well, if you have a supernova explode, it leaves a small, tiny, highly compacted star, which is called a neutron star, and it's only 30 miles wide. And you say, what? A star that is only 30 miles wide? Give me a break. Well, it is that densely packed. Okay, fine. Now we know what and it pulses, boom, 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 and it spins rapidly. Okay, now it's time to consult some experts.
A pulsar is a rapidly spinning neutron star, which is the small, incredibly dense remnant of a much more massive star. A teaspoon of matter from a neutron star weighs as much as Mount Everest, and a neutron star is so compact that a ball about 15 miles across contains more matter than our sun. Neutron stars spin between 7 and 40,000 times a minute and form with incredibly strong magnetic fields. Rapid spin and intense magnetic fields drive powerful beams of electromagnetic radiation, including gamma rays. As the pulse...
So a tablespoon of a magnetar weighs 100 billion tons. Okay, it's even more compact. Okay, because a magnetar is formed. Watch, you got two neutron stars that are going to collide. When they collide, they explode. When they explode, they do one of two things. Now, it took us 10 years to figure this out, more than 10 years. They either create a black hole or they create a magnetar. And a magnetar can be only 18 miles wide. And you say, a star that is only 18 miles wide, give me a break. Yes. Okay? It is the most magnetic object known in the universe. So when I contact experts, if you say, I say I'm a professor, and they politely often reply, but if I say I'm a professor working on a crop circle, they say, you're going into the junk folder. So often I send diagrams, or I just might ask a very generic question about magnetars and their pulse rates, and I get some replies from that. Then I reconstruct what I have found out. So let's start with a neutron star collision first. Don't worry, stay with us, do not leave. Okay, we're getting to the point, but it's still a little more effort is required here.
Their basic properties were unknown until NASA's SWIFT satellite began work in 2004. Astronomers suspected that crashing neutron stars could explain short bursts.
Gamma ray
A
burst.
neutron star is what remains when a star several times the mass of the sun collapses and explodes. With more than the sun's mass packed into a sphere less than 18 miles across, these objects are incredibly dense. Just a sugar cube-sized piece of neutron star can weigh as much as all the water in the Great Lakes. When two orbiting neutron stars collide, they merge and form a black hole, releasing enormous amounts of energy in the process. Armed with state-of-the-art supercomputer models, scientists have shown that colliding neutron stars can produce the energetic jet required for a gamma-ray burst. Earlier simulations demonstrated that mergers could make black holes. Others had shown that the high-speed particle jets needed to make a gamma-ray burst would continue if placed in the swirling wreckage of a recent merger. Now, the simulations reveal the middle step of the process, how the merging star's magnetic field organizes itself into outwardly directed components capable of forming a jet. The Damiana supercomputer at Germany's Max Planck Institute for Gravitational Physics needed 6 weeks to reveal the details of a process that unfolds in just 35 thousandths of a second.
So this is very rare. Now, she didn't mention magnetars, but we're going to come to another person from NASA who will tell us that merging neutron stars might make a black hole, but they also might make a magnetar. There are only 10 magnetars known in the Milky Way. Very rare, very hard to spot. Takes them 6 weeks to analyze a millisecond worth of data. So here is an actual video, an audio recording of two neutron stars colliding, recently made. Listen. First time that was ever measured. So that is a huge explosion in the universe, creates a black hole or a magnetar. Here comes our expert here on magnetars. What comes from a neutron star collision, a black hole or a magnetar?
When these stars die, they no longer have the light pressure pushing outward to counteract the massive gravity pulling inward. So this enormous inward force is so strong that it overcomes the repulsive force that keeps atoms from collapsing. Protons and electrons are forced into the same space, becoming neutrons, and the whole thing is just made of neutrons. Oh, did the star have hydrogen, helium, carbon, and iron before? Well, that's too bad, because now it's all neutrons. You get pulsars when neutron stars first form, when all that former star is compressed into a teeny tiny package. The conservation of angular momentum spins the star up to tremendous velocities, sometimes hundreds of times a second. But when neutron stars form, about 1 in 10 does something really, really strange, becoming one of the most mysterious and terrifying objects in the universe. They become magnetars. Now, you probably heard the name, but what are they? Now, as I said, magnetars are neutron stars formed from supernovae. But something unusual happens as they form, spinning up their magnetic field. The strength of the magnetic field around a magnetar completely boggles the imagination. The magnetic field of the Earth's core is about 25 Gauss, and here on the surface we experience less than half a Gauss. A regular bar magnet is about 100 Gauss. Just a regular neutron star has a magnetic field of 1 trillion Gauss, and magnetars are 1,000 times more powerful than that, with a magnetic field of 1 quadrillion Gauss.
So, the magnetar then is the most highly magnetic object known in the universe. Now, our crop circle, back to the crop circle, we're working on a theory here that we have 2 neutron stars that are merging, colliding, and when they do, a little tiny dot in the center is representative of a magnetar. Okay? And that is a very rare occurrence and a very important occurrence because it teaches us a great deal about gamma ray bursts, about neutron star mergers, and the physics of all of that. So that's the kind of what we're thinking about right now with this crop circle. Now, people gathered in this, and they may have certainly a different interpretation, but notice the people gathered in the very center part of this crop circle, which is the most important part. That's, at least the way we're looking at it, that's the magnetar. Okay, the 18-mile wide, most magnetic object in the universe. So how do we decide which of these theories is correct? Well, we got the hoax or vandal theory. They had a team, they went there on July 13th, drove another 50 miles, had another team, did it. They did it exact, really precise, wonderful, counterclockwise. They must have worked it out on paper before they did it. No barking dogs, no footprints. Congratulations. They're going to all think aliens did it. Wonderful. I'm sure there's somebody out there who says, yeah, we and our team, we did it, and we had ourselves a beer afterwards. Okay, there's always that possibility. Another idea is that human beings made us a spiritual labyrinth, which is a meditative kind of sacred artifact. Great, good idea. But why would you vandalize, if you're a nice person who's into spirituality and meditation and caring for others, why would you wreck a farmer's field, 2 farmers' fields? And the average cost is $1,000 to $5,000 in damage. Why would you do that? It doesn't make sense to me. Okay, it could be a wormhole, which I didn't investigate very thoroughly, and maybe it is. Could be mirror image matter and antimatter, and I have to admit that attracted me, even though I didn't know much about it. But when I saw that magnetic diagram, that animated magnetic diagram, that's what led me to the whole idea of electromagnetism, astrophysics, neutron stars making a magnetar. So how do we tell which of these theories is the right theory? I mean, we're trying to be objective and open-minded. I thought, that's going to be a hard thing to answer, and actually the answer is very simple. It was what originally attracted me to this crop circle. July 13th, 2011. two crop circles on the same day. Why? What's going on July 13th? Well, here's the answer. On July 14th, two astronomers in Madrid discovered a magnetar, a rare magnetar. The next day, 24 hours later, ultimately named it Swift J1822.3. It was discovered on July 14th by an Italian and a Spanish researcher at CSIC. Okay? 24 hours after the crop circles announced it's coming. This was an announcement. A magnetar is coming. Pay attention. I'm quoting now from my book, Do Not Yawn. In a second academic paper with no fewer than 19 authors, the magnetar was named Swift J1822. It continued to be observed until April of 2012. A third academic article said it had extraordinary periodic modulations at the spin period of the underlying neutron star. It also said that the outburst radiates away in minutes. A fourth article from Harvard confirmed that this magnetar was discovered July 14th, 2011, exactly one day after our two crop circles were reported. The magnetar pulse was considered extraordinary. They watched it for the first 25 days carefully. After July 14th, every astronomer in the world started watching this newly discovered magnetar. It was pulsing every 6 to 12 seconds, and then these pulses die out. It was something to watch if you're an astronomer. That's a graph of the pulses on July 14th and after. Okay? So, your wow is coming. So, the center dot in this crop circle is the tiny magnetar formed by the merger of two neutron stars tomorrow. Are you getting this message? So, if you were to translate this crop circle into English, it would say, pay attention to a coming magnetar event. It will occur very soon. It will teach you more about the origin of gamma ray bursts, magnetism, and the physics of neutron star mergers. And that's the translation of this crop circle. And you say to yourself, oh my God, what if that's true? I mean, it was a 24-hour advance warning. So my question to myself after I got over the wow was, if the magnetar was observed on Earth on July 14th, who could have known about it 24 hours earlier? I mean, where would you be if you, where would you have to have an observatory to see a magnetar 24 hours before we saw it here on Earth? Well, I figured if you were on Pluto and you had an observatory on Pluto, you'd see it 5 hours before we saw it here. But somebody saw it 24 hours before we saw it here. So that person or entity was not from here. Okay? And that's when you say, my God, could it be true? Seriously, could this be true? Could it really be an extraterrestrial communication? Excuse my sense of humor. An extraterrestrial communication that we're ignoring because we're taught to ignore it, because we think tricksters and human beings make all these things, and we shouldn't pay any attention to their meaning or try to decode them or decipher them. So let's summarize here. Our first crop circle is about radioactive material interacting, creating a fissile reaction, a possible Chernobyl right across the river from a nuclear power plant that the following year actually had an incident and shut down. And we missed it completely because we don't think about crop circles seriously. And we looked at a strange example of vitamin A in the middle of a red poppy field and just disregard. And in fact, 1 out of every 7 human beings suffers from vitamin A deficiency. And we looked at these mysterious crop circles and probably disregarded, but we didn't. And we thought, my God, this is a very, very rare cosmic event that this crop circle is alerting us to pay attention to, and it's coming tomorrow. Well, it took us 6 years before we figured out these were two neutron stars colliding. First, we thought it was a supernova that happened on July 14th. And then they said there were articles written about this, and maybe it was that, and maybe it was that. And about 5 years later, they decided it was two neutron stars that collided and made a magnetar. But someone knew about that on July 13th. Okay, so that's what this book is about. There are 40 such wows in this book, and I want to thank you for your patience. I want to thank you for watching, and thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. I appreciate it.